Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Great to see everybody here live and streaming online that are watching with us. Welcome to the Pathway to the Stars 100 Years of the Royal Canadian Air Force book launch event this morning. My name is Jeremy Diamond, and I'm founding CEO of the Royal Canadian Air Force Foundation. I would like to acknowledge today that we are gathered on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and what is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis cultures. Our mission at the Foundation is to recognize, foster, and celebrate the RCAF through community engagement, education programs, and commemorative activities. Our purpose is to inspire Canadians, particularly young people, to learn about and support this important national institution, the RCAF, and to highlight the future of Canadian aviation and aerospace, ensuring its dynamic growth and expansion. We accomplish this through annual scholarships, public activations, digital storytelling, and projects like the book we're about to unveil today. It is fitting that we will be discussing the history of the RCAF today while standing on this spot. Prior to the Second World War, this was RCAF Station Downsview. At the end of the war, 400 Squadron was moved to Downsview, along with the reformed 411 Squadron Air Material Base. At its peak in the 70s, approximately 3,000 military personnel and their families answered the call of duty at what was then named CFB Toronto, and lived and worked in these buildings and lived in the homes that surround us today. I want to thank our friends at Centennial College, at the Downsview Aerospace Innovation and Research Hub, DARE, for hosting us in this wonderful space. Thank you so much. I also want to recognize the chair of our board of directors, Honorary Colonel John Wright, and members of our advisory council, Tanya Yearwood, George Nutter, and Honorary Colonel Renee Van Kessel, as well as Joe Dwyer, Elizabeth Chesney, and our great partners at U of T Press, all of whom work so closely with us to make this book a reality. Today we will hear from the authors and special guests about the past, present, and future of the RCAF, and give everybody a chance to meet the authors and these special guests, and of course buy a book at the end. We're grateful for the support of Open Text, our event sponsor, as we launch Pathway to the Stars in cities across Canada this fall and into 2024, which of course is the centennial year of the RCAF. It's now my pleasure to introduce our moderator for today's first chat. Rod Black is probably very familiar to all of you. A former CTV and TSN sportscaster, Rod's knowledge and versatility and enthusiasm has earned him the reputation of being one of Canada's most recognized and distinguished voices. The 5-time Gemini Award nominee is also the host and narrator of various primetime specials and the honorary sportsperson for Plan Canada, and has been a long time supporter of the Canadian Armed Forces. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Rod Black.
Jeremy, thanks. How are you? Hello, everyone. I know what you're saying. What's a sports guy doing here? I'm not here to give scores, but I can tell you that I'm here because I do have a great love and fondness for our armed forces, our military, our aviation, our Navy, and I see some of members of the armed forces. I'd like to give you all a great round of applause. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service. So yeah, I'm here to moderate today. I do have a great fondness and love and a passion. I've been on a couple of trips overseas with our armed forces, and I've learned a lot more about the men and women who have sacrificed their time. Some have sacrificed their lives for our great country, and we're here today on this land because of the great people. So I'd like to introduce, oh, and by the way, here's breaking news. I give breaking news. Pathway to the Stars, unveiled last Tuesday, is the #1 bestseller on Amazon right now. True that. True that. Because they got great authors too, and a great subject, 100 years of the Royal Canadian Air Force. I'm going to bring the authors up now. A great friend of mine, first of all, who I got a chance to golf with the last few years, who I really consider a true hero. A commander of the Royal Canadian Air Force, a general, of course, a guy who led 8 Wing as well in Trenton, and a guy who was just kind of beautifully transitioned into the private sector and never, ever forgotten about the Royal Canadian Air Force, where he is a founding member of the RCAF Foundation. My good friend, Mr. Mike Hood.
Thanks, Rod.
I guess I can add author to that now, too.
Thank you.
And his co-author, a gentleman who began as a cadet and through the years had such a great passion and obviously was inspired by the RCAF. He is an honorary colonel as well. Again, somebody who is a great leader in our business sector, has done so much for the Royal Canadian Air Force, the co-author, Tom Jenkins. Welcome. Have a seat, gentlemen. We're going to be casual here. Michael, I guess I'll first start with you. Author. Author.
Well, you've seen me golf. I had to do something else.
It's not a golf book. But tell me about this passion, obviously, and why we're here celebrating this book and the life and history of the RCAF.
Well, Rod, we created the RCAF Foundation to help support the Air Force and its causes and its peoples. And that's been an ongoing love and passion of a number of us. And we were talking about ways how we could potentially raise funds so that they could be put to better use. And my co-author, Tom, who's written a number of books, suggested, why don't we do a book? That was probably about 2 years ago, maybe even a bit more. And then it just came together, 100 stories for 100 years. We didn't want it just to be about aircraft, because typically a lot of Air Force books focus on airplanes, but we wanted to be about people and we wanted to be about places. So it was a long journey, but some amazing stories. That's one of my favorite ones.
RCAF flyers,
Yeah.
right? Kraut line, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the pictures in it tell a story and help illuminate a national institution that I think all Canadians can take great pride in, that's endured through war and peace. And as we can see what's going around in the world around us today, as I was fond of saying in Ottawa, you go to war with the Air Force you have, not the one you wish you had. And so, you know, making sure that there's that continued support for the Air Force is important.
Yeah. Tom, 100 stories for 100 years, you could probably have had 1 million stories, probably difficult to vet them out. What did you learn about in this project? I mean, because there's probably stories that all of us are going, wow, what did you learn?
Yeah, I knew that the Air Force had done a lot. I had no idea. We had great difficulty picking 100. Mike was very disciplined and determined that we would stick to 100. We could have easily done 200. What I learned, and an area that's of interest for me specifically, is about innovation. And the number of inventions that the RCAF drove is incredible. We take them all for granted today all over the world, whether it was the G suit or the black box. Those were all created by the NRC and the RCAF working together.
Incredible. Mike, you've, unlike most of us mere mortals, you've been up in the skies. You wear the patch. Going through this project in this book, and now that you've kind of, you know, stepped away a little bit, retired, become a best-selling author, does it reinvigorate that passion, knowing what you have done and where you have been?
Well, I don't think it ever leaves once you're, you know, those of you still serving, there's a few in the audience, you don't realize it till you retire, but never felt like a day of work in the Air Force. I loved every minute, even the hardest, longest days. So that passion kind of stays with you, and it's something that you want to give back to, because it's responsible for all of the best things in my life came from my association with the Royal Canadian Air Force. So I want to keep giving back. In fact, I still talk about we. I talk about the Air Force like I'm still in it, and people remind me I'm not in it anymore. But
yeah, did you have a dream, Tom? Too, you were a cadet. You're an honorary colonel. Did you kind of have a dream to be? Well, unlike what Mike did.
Unlike Mike, you know, he went all the way up and became commander. I actually failed aircrew selection because of my eyes. And my first flight, more than 50 years ago, was on this base. I was stationed on this base and flew in an Otter in, 71, 72, something like that. And I remember staying on this base. And so I've been a fellow traveler to the RCAF as a reservist, as a honorary colonel, et cetera. And I've been able to observe the organization, and it's been spectacular. What they have been able to do with what they were given to work with, to this day, I shake my head, because I can't figure out sometimes how they maintain tempo and they actually deliver the effect with what they were given. It's unbelievable. I wish I had them in my company because they are so clever in how they do it. You walk into a hangar anywhere in Canada and they're somehow MacGyvering it, you know. And flight safety, all that stuff followed, but they are so creative as a culture.
The RCAF for 100 years, I mean, think about our history and what we've gone through in the last 100 years, and we're still going through today. I mean, as glorious and the pictures and the planes look, it's kind of intoxicating. I mean, you're still there to serve and protect, and you've seen that all through the years. And did you gain or glean something as well from the history? You probably knew a lot about the history, but did you even learn a little bit more about the history as you went through this process?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I was deathly afraid of missing something.
Yeah.
I had reached out to every former commander for ideas and wanted to make sure that we represented all parts of the Air Force, that everyone serving today could see themselves in these books, but some of the stories going back to the Second World War, to recognize the magnitude of the Canadian contribution to successive conflicts is remarkable when you think about 8 million Canadians in the First World War and a million were in uniform. Similar ratio in the Second World War.
Yeah.
So Canadians have always answered the call, and I don't think that's any different today than it was back then, but that really came out in some of the stories in the book.
And you see some of the stories, like look at some of the old day looks. I mean, could you imagine? You learn about Billy Bishop and the great heroes that we kind of hear about. And I guess the youth of today here, well, let's go down to Billy Bishop Airport not knowing exactly who Billy Bishop was and how important he was, Tom.
Yeah. And also the first flights in Canada, Alexander Graham Bell. I actually didn't know that. That blew me away, that he had been involved in the experimentation of flight. The other thing that struck me, consistently, the Air Force punched above its weight. After the end of World War II and the beginning of the Cold War, the core of NATO in the air was the Royal Canadian Air Force, and it's covered in the book. There's just time after time, you have these aha moments, and I hope you all get a chance to explore the book. We've made the book in such a way that you can literally open it up anywhere. You don't have to read it from page 1 all the way through. I would encourage you to do that because it'll make a lot more sense. But you can actually open the book up and literally start reading. Some of the things that may stand out for some of you, in terms of women, my goodness, World War II just changed everything. There are so many examples of engineers, pilots. It's unbelievable how that changed. World War II really changed in terms of the kinds of people and their roles and what they did. And if you look through, you'll see all the sort of trajectory, if you will, of Canada through the century, reflected in the Royal Canadian Air Force.
The world, our world, rightfully has gained so much insight into inclusion, and the Air Force for the longest time, and our military and our armed forces, have always been about that, about women in the forces, about Indigenous peoples in the forces, LGBTQ now. I mean, is that a big part of this book as well, some of those stories?
Well, I think all of those stories are covered in depth at it. I mean, it's what people don't probably realize that Canada led the way in the integration of women into every role in the military, and the first female fighter pilots in the Western world were Royal Canadian Air Force pilots, and that's covered in the book as well. So a lot to be proud of as an institution. You know, you talked about innovation, and I was just there was an event here last week, and Brandon Robinson, who used to fly fighters in the Air Force, has launched a Horizon aircraft company and unlaunched an eVTOL aircraft. So that innovative spirit, I wish you were still in uniform, Brandon, but we'll find a role for you.
I see
that kind of innovation.
I see a book coming. Again, I just marvel at the pictures too. And for me, sports. We're lucky enough to go and watch sports these days, and in society, everybody takes it for granted. But take a look at the fingerprints of where sports are today in terms of terminology. A lot of it has to do with the Air Force. You think about the hockey team that exists here in Toronto, essentially named because of the Air Force, and the RCAF Flyers, who won the gold medal in 1948.
And in fact, there's one story that I didn't know that's in there, and you may recall if you're a Bruins fan, the famous Kraut line, 3 German kids from Waterloo, Ontario. They were the 3 leading scorers, played for the Bruins, and they all joined the RCAF on the same day after a game in the Boston Gardens against the Montreal Canadiens. And the Canadians carried the 3 of them around the ice on their shoulders while everyone in the stadium sang Auld Lang Syne, and they all went into the RCAF the next day, and all 3 of them deployed to Europe. So those kind of stories that you unpack has been a real pleasure writing it.
Yeah, and Tom, again, looking at some of the historic aircraft and the early stages, it's 100 years goes quick. It's really essentially a little bit more than a lifetime. But the technology, as you mentioned before, to see the jets and the fighters we have now and the people who operate them and the technology behind them, that must even amaze you.
Well, think of where we're sitting, where so much happened in terms of innovation. Where we're sitting right now, so many really, really hard problems were solved. Everyone thought that supersonic flight was not possible because of the turbulence, and yet so much of the fundamental work was done right here where we're sitting. And that's one of the reasons why it's so special to be here at Downsview, that those demons that people regarded was figured out. Today, National Research Council has the Trisonic Wind Tunnel, which allows you to test all the way through. And it's relevant today because we've become experts at longevity. F-18, one of the longest airframes ever. And one of the reasons is because we've studied it and made it safe to use. And so there's a whole variety of things that we continue to do and will do in the future. You just have to put on the TV or watch on YouTube or whatever way you get your media these days, and you'll see that the innovation has not stopped. And for us in Canada, we've got to keep up. And it's places like here that'll help us.
General, only a couple of minutes. What do you hope that people get from this book, especially with the RCAF tattooed on your heart forever?
Well, first and foremost, the book is to raise funds for the RCF Foundation, something very close to my heart. But one of the key things that I'm proud of the Foundation's work is in scholarships. Scholarships for any Canadian wanting to take a program focused in STEM, but in aerospace. They don't have to come into the RCF, but many of them hopefully will. So as this book hopefully bridges, the next generation of RCF members who will experience, maybe an early glimpse of what life could be like in the Air Force in the book.
Tom, how about you? You've written a few. Where does this one rank so far for you?
Oh, this is near and dear to my heart. I think the most important thing for me, Canadians, we're very quiet people. We don't really, jump up and down a lot. You cannot read this book and not be moved by what a contribution so many Canadians have made over this past century, and something to step back and reflect and be proud about. It's all there, it's factual, and for me, I think it's a wonderful moment for us to step back and say, hey, you know, we really did contribute to things.
Well, gentlemen, we all thank you for your service. Mostly today, though, thank you for taking us on this flight, Pathway to the Stars. I know you're going to be signing some books here today, but congratulations. I think it's fantastic.
Thanks, Rod. Thanks for joining us
Thanks,
today.
Mike. Thanks. Mike Hood and Tom Jenkins, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rod, and thank you for our authors again for sharing some of your experiences, and thank you so much for working with us on this incredible book. We're so excited to have it out to everybody this week. Before we invite our next special guest to the stage to have another chat with Rod, the RCAF Foundation is proud to screen these short 3 videos that highlight some of the stories, some of the 100 stories of Pathway to the Stars. We want to direct your attention to the 2 screens on either side of the stage and enjoy these videos of Pathways to the Stars.
Shortly after the Second World War began, Alan Bundy tried to enlist in the Royal Canadian Air Force, following his father and grandfather's military service in the First World War. At the time, the RCAF prevented the enlistment of Black Canadians as pilots or aircrew. Once these discriminatory policies were removed in 1942, Bundy did enlist. After pilot training, he was stationed with 404 Squadron. Though an excellent pilot, no one would fly with him because of the color of his skin until Sergeant Elwood Wright stepped up to be his navigator. Bundy and Wright would go on to fly 42 successful operations, defending the coastline against German U-boats. At a time of widespread racial prejudice, Flying Officer Alan Bundy challenged the barriers facing him to become the first Black Canadian to fly a combat mission in the RCAF. In the fall of 1990, Canada entered the First Gulf War. The Canadian Armed Forces' participation in the military efforts there would be codenamed Operation Friction, the first time the Canadian Armed Forces had gone to war in 40 years. This included 24 CF-18 Hornets, nicknamed the Desert Cats. The Desert Cats flew combat air patrol missions over the Persian Gulf 12 to 24 hours a day with the assistance of refueling aircraft, and later, sweep and escort missions and aerial bombardment. With the hard-working ground crews keeping the jets ready to fly, the Desert Cats showcased the high standards of the RCAF and completed their missions with no accidents or fatalities. The silver, sleek F-86 Sabre lanced through the air at supersonic speeds as the RCAF's frontline fighter in the early days of the Cold War. When the RCAF commissioned the plane, Canadair rebuilt the Sabre under license. It added larger wings for improved maneuverability and an Arenda turbojet engine. It was the Canadian version, the Mark VI, that would be considered the best Sabre ever built. Throughout the 1950s, Canadair produced more than 1,800 Sabres. Most of these were used by the squadrons of 1 Canadian Air Division in Europe. Europe was in awe of the Sabre, not only because of the design, but also because of how well the Canadian pilots flew them.
So those are 3 of 100. I don't know if we're going to do 100, Tom, but we'll do something close to 100 and have those out in 1 minute. videos through next year and in the future to celebrate and commemorate the centennial and beyond. So very happy, and stay tuned to our website and social to see when they come out. Rod, I'll throw it back to you for our next set of conversations and allow you to introduce the next guest.
And the Major is coming later for lunch, correct?
He's coming later for lunch.
Yeah, okay. Major David Fraser, again, one of the great heroes in Canadian Armed Forces history, part of Operation Medusa, of course, in Afghanistan. He will be with us for lunch, so you can get a chance to chat with him a little bit later. But I'm fascinated to talk to this guy. I just met him, but I know all about him because I watched all of his shows on Discovery. He has a huge passion for flying, obviously, part of the Snowbirds for a while. He's been part of aviation. He's got a great love for flying. He's taken it to film and television and streaming and all of that. He's a producer, a director, aviation nut, and he's with us today. Please welcome Robert Scratch Mitchell. Okay, so first question I'm going to ask you. Where'd you get that name Scratch?
Well, it's as most people know, you don't get to pick your own call signs, and you certainly don't get to pick cool ones or receive cool ones. And indeed, I was a baby fighter pilot in Bagotville, and I was an anglophone, test anglophone on a French squadron, 433 squadron, qui s'y fera typique. And in my first week, we were doing some training, and it was all in French. Weather was in French, everything. And I was keeping up barely because I was just the bare minimum bilingual. And the French exchange officer from France was briefing me, and he asked me if I had ever done air-to-air refueling in French, and I said, yes. I had done it once on a Hercules at Cold Lake on the training unit, and of course we blast off, not thinking it would be different. I turn into the sky, and then I see this big airplane with dihedral. I go, that's not the Hercules. And I said, what are the chances it's a different technique than what I learned on the Hercules? As it turns out, it's a massively different technique. And I scratched the airplane canopy up and down and forward and aft, and did the mission and landed, and I went to the ground crew in my broken French. I said, I think you should be able to buff it out. And they came in with wide eyes, and they said, you just about lost your head. And so that Friday at the call sign review board, I was forever known as the Scratch Man.
The Scratch Man.
Yeah, so that's where it happens. Not for cool things, it's always for some foible.
Yeah, I've been in one of those in a video game. That's it. For again, us who have never experienced anything like the thrill of being in the skies in one of these planes. What's it been like? What's it like for you?
It's, to me, I never lost that. I still get the privilege of flying jets in air shows. I'm flying an ex-RCAF T-33 in the air show circuit now, and the day I did my first jet ride to flying just a few weeks ago, in fact, I flew the Toronto show just a few weeks ago here, or a few months ago here, and I still get that thrill. I still get the passion, and what I love about this book is it's capturing the moments, and for whatever reason, I was always a pilot that appreciated the moments that I experienced, and maybe I'll tell one quick story. We were in Turkey. I was deployed again in my first squadron, and I was just transitioning to being a lead, and we were doing this mission, and at the time we were still doing low-level attack profiles, and we were tasked to fly over the hills of Turkey and do the simulated attack, and on this little outpost. And we launch off, and my lead breaks, so I go off on my own, and I'm raging around. I'm doing 540 knots, a couple hundred feet above the ground, and we're doing what's called nap of the earth. We're following the contours, so we're rolling upside down and pulling on the backside of these rolling hills. And as I apex this one hill, I look down, and no kidding, I saw a shepherd looking up at me with his, I think, a flock of sheep, whatever they call it. And we met in this moment, just this juxtaposition in time, eye to eye, and I was looking back at least 2,000 years in history, and he was looking up at this crazy warbird in the sky. And it struck me what a powerful moment that was to me, and this, again, juxtaposition of time. And I'd like to record those into my journals and memories. So that's why I really think it's important that this book has come out, to document some of the stories. And of course, the greatest flattery to me and being honored to be part of one of those 100 stories, because as Tom said, and I think you were probably shy on saying there's 200 stories, probably 2,000 stories, maybe 20,000 stories that could be told. So to be part of it is really special.
Flying upside down like that, I will never ever complain about traffic on the 404 ever again. Like that what you all do is absolutely incredible. Through the book and again through the air show, you get a lot of knowledge, and it's a great education for people who go to an air show, and they go, hey, yes, it's, it's obviously great, but here's what the RCAF does. Again, for people who are going to be reading the book, and obviously one of your stories, how important is the future of the RCAF being recorded in this book?
If I understand what you're saying, how important is the RCAF, or how is it important?
Yep.
Well, I think it's absolutely necessary for the future of Canada. We were and are a major player in the Western world, highly respected. We've established ourselves as an Air Force to be not just reckoned with, but to be admired. Going back, we were the creators of what has become the modern flight safety system that many air forces around the world have adopted. We've been innovators, to use the innovation theme, in so many ways. And I think that legacy compels us to keep that going, because we have something to offer not only to the world of aviation, but to the military aviation around the world and our allies.
And having a book is obviously great to help record it, and it's clearly going to be a compelling read, and just to see all the stories, get them right in front of you. But you also have taken that another step, and you have taken it into the television and film world. Tell the folks out there some of the stuff that you have done, particularly branching into that world.
Well, it's about storytelling, and I think that, again, what I love about the book and what the RCAF Foundation is doing is it's storytelling, and that's what I did. It was a very difficult decision. I was very flattered to have been given the opportunity to go on and rank and perhaps become a general and beyond, and I had a very tough decision to make. But as a child, I wanted to be a fighter pilot, and I wanted to be a filmmaker, and I had done so many things in my career. I thought this might be an interesting time to go out, but I was going to go out and get into the entertainment world, specifically as it relates to aviation, and that's what I've done. And indeed, some of the projects that I've completed that you've seen and mentioned, the Air Show TV series and some of the movies that I've worked on. I directed a healthy portion of the Midway movie, and just to bring some authenticity and be able to tell that story authentically. And then indeed with some of the projects now, the Air Force story. Gosh, one of the movies that I'm working on right now, and the script is almost done. It's an ex-RCAF technician out of Cold Lake working on the jets in the 60s. He became a bush pilot, and not many people know the story, but he survived 58 days in the north in February 1967, and it's the longest surviving air crew in the history of the world, and that's an RCAF member, and I'm going to tell that story.
Well, I was going to say that's beauty too. Like, we saw what Top Gun did in the theaters. You know what it did, and again, the great Canadian stories, because it is storytelling. The great Canadian stories that exist in this book, you could also fill up a lot of screens.
Yeah, there would be a lot of content in there. Yes.
So when you said you were a kid, where did it start? When did it start? How did you get the passion to fly?
Well, you may have seen the picture that's come through here, but I'm as it turns out, a third-generation fighter pilot in Canada, and so my grandfather was a Spitfire pilot in World War II. My dad flew F-5s and T-33s and T-Birds, and so I grew up with it coursing through the air and through my veins, seeing my father. But I will say that probably my grandfather had more of an impact, because I think the nostalgia and the romance of the Spitfire, and while he was a very reserved man, he retired as the city fire chief in Sudbury, Ontario. He didn't talk a lot, like a lot of the veterans, they didn't talk a lot about, but he would pull me aside, and I don't know if he saw something in me or I showed that interest in aviation, and he would tell me these stories, just in little snippets. He would tell, when I'd roll in with my Mark 14 and I see that train, he goes, Robbie, he said there was nothing else in the world. He would describe it like that, and viscerally to me. And I would just...
Everybody's been around. Everybody has a relative like that.
Yeah, but he would barely talk about it. He did, however, give me some key life moments. Like, he was funny because he was a man of few words, but he would tell me when I was just starting to date, he would say, come in just to the room, he'd go, Robbie, he goes, and realize he's a man of his times. He said, Robbie, he goes, tell a pretty woman she's smart, and a smart woman she's pretty. And he would leave. I'm like, okay, thanks, Grandpa. And then as I joined the Air Force...
I think those are all on TikTok today.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. But And as I was joining the Air Force, he was delighted, of course, and he eventually pinned my wings on, which was a very proud moment for me. He told me, he pulled me aside again, he goes, whatever you do, don't do anything dumb. And he goes, and don't fly under a bridge. And he thought about it, and he goes, but definitely don't do it twice. Apparently he did, and he got busted in rank. And then, you know, he's had other gems, like he's never take marital advice or financial advice from a pilot, and then he would leave. You know, he was a funny guy, but
Should have had his own TV show.
yeah, no, he was a character. But he passed a few years ago, and I got to document in film a bunch of his stories, and he really came alive, and it was so wonderful to see him come alive. And I saw that twice. I saw him when he was talking about it, and then one of those pictures, I had this amazing opportunity when I was the F-18 airshow pilot to take my dad and my grandfather flying at the same time. My dad in my back seat, and my CO took my grandfather, and unbelievable transformation. I saw, at the time, was a 78-year-old man, you know, nervous and feeble-ish, getting in the airplane. He came out of that thing, he was 2 inches taller, and I saw the fangs, I saw the horns, I saw him become a fighter pilot again, and it was so powerful. And I sat and just watched him walk up, and with a smile on his face. He hadn't been in a fighter-type airplane since the last day when he left in World War II, and so powerful.
Yeah, those are great stories, and that's what it's about. The stories is that sometimes we get caught up in our world, our little world, about all the things that, you know, that seem significant but really aren't that significant, and how important the RCAF has been to our lives in Canada, I think would be probably the most impactful thing that would come out of this book, I would think.
I believe so, and I think it is important to get this book widely distributed because, you know, even my son and my daughter, while they know some of our family stories, they don't know the full story.
Yeah, I want to get the book for them.
Yeah, and it's important that the next generations understand what the history of the RCF is about and what the future might be.
And there could be another Scratch out there who's hoping to be a pilot or a filmmaker.
Well, and it's interesting you say that because everyone says, is there going to be a fourth generation? And, you know, going back to the cadet, or my daughter, out of the blue, asked to join Air Cadets when she was 14. And like a lot of young girls these days, they're confused, the pressures of social media and the bullying that goes on. Air Cadets made an absolute difference in my daughter's life, and the aspects that I wasn't able to give to her as a father, heartbreaking to see her struggling with things. Air Cadets gave her that. And so in a little way, she was wearing the fourth generation in a uniform. But then we went to Top Gun, and I was invited to do the opening in Vancouver and the preamble, as I work in that industry, obviously. And we walked out. My son's an athlete. He wants to go into sports psychology and maybe physiotherapy. We walked out of the movie. He said, "Screw that, Dad. I want to be a fighter pilot." So who knows? Maybe there is a fourth generation.
Well, I will tell you, great stories, and 4 generations. Congratulations on all you've done. Keep telling those stories like Mike and Tom. We need to hear those stories. Thank you for being here today. Good luck on your next what's your next project?
This movie about the
RCAF, the next one?
that, and something I can't talk about, but is imminent. I'm going to meet a production company this afternoon, but it involves...
Nobody will know.
No, we're broadcast live here. But it involves Southern Alberta, Vulcan Station, British Commonwealth Air Training Program base, Montana, late 50s, fighter jets, and Canada's story is part of it, so we'll see.
Keep recording those stories. Thank you for being here.
My
really appreciate it. Yeah. Thank you. Robert Scratch Mitchell, everybody.
Thank you so much, Scratch. It's been great getting to know you over the last couple of years and learning about your story and your contribution to the book. I think it's in page 108. So when you buy the book, you'll see Scratch's story, a great photo which we're showing up here of your dad and your grandfather, as you'd mentioned. So thank you so much. Before we close the formal program and get to some books and signing and some photos and conversations with the authors, I'm excited to share with you now previews of our new podcast series, inspired by the book called Pathway to the Stars, Tales of Rescue. Each episode draws inspiration from Canadian search and rescue operations spanning the past century. Through masterful storytelling, this podcast series brings to life the dramatic and often heart-wrenching stories of brave individuals who have dedicated their lives to saving others. The producers and writers, Jason Wilson and Sarah Moyle, are here with us today. Thank you so much for your work with this and working closely with us. And we have a couple of previews to show right now. Please enjoy a sneak peek of Pathway to the Stars, Tales of Rescue.
The RCAF Foundation presents Pathway to the Stars, Tales of Rescue. Stories based on actual events from a century of history in the RCAF. Episode 1, Mercy Flight.
Dials are freezing over. As long as the vaccine stays warm. If it freezes, it's done for. Is the coal heater, is it still warm?
Yes, vaccine's all wrapped in the blanket.
Vic?
It's fine back there.
Vic! What? I'm going to need you to move my hand.
Your hand?
My hand. It's frozen in place on the yoke. Ugh. All right. Now, there, look hard. Can you just see the southern shore right there? That's Lesser Slave Lake. Now, we can't navigate this wall of ice up here, so we're going to have to drop down.
You want to fly low? This isn't the Edmonton Fair, Wop.
Trust me, and hang on.
Episode 2, The Parabels.
Okay, there's wreckage down by that clearing. Coming in as low as we can here. Now, jump!
You've got this, Gracie. Arch 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. Check 1,000. Chute is open. Oh, God. Feel like I'm falling faster than I did in training. Must be all this extra heavy gear. Whoa! Oh no! My harness! It's slipping! Ah!
Episode 3, Box Top 22. What is the status of the rescue unit helicopters from Gander?
They need to turn around. The conditions are too difficult out east to negotiate.
And the chopper from Goose Bay?
Canceled. It was taking them too long to get through.
Damn blizzard. Hanson, we need to put together a ground rescue team and have them head out on the Arctic terrain vehicles immediately from alert.
Yes, sir.
Captain de Groot, I think I saw something overhead, just to the west. Yes, it's a plane. A rescue plane.
A plane! Overhead!
Quickly, grab the flare guns.
Got them, more.
Fire them off, now!
Please let them find us.
I don't know if you're supposed to applaud after trailers of podcasts, but feel free to. Very excited to continue to do podcasts in one form or another. We've done a number of different ones with Jason and Sarah. We did ones last year with Dave Trafford and his team, and just feel this is another unique way of telling the stories from the book. The book will sit on a shelf, sit on a coffee table, be given as gifts, but there's 100 stories in there that we can tell any number of ways over the next number of years. So very excited to explore this way of doing that. I want to thank you for joining us. We wanted to keep this as a shortish event. We got lots of things to do in your day today. We have books to sign and authors to meet. So I just want to thank again our wonderful authors, Tom Jenkins and Mike Hood, for being here. And for Scratch Mitchell as well, for being here as well. Thank you so much. And our wonderful moderator, Rod Black, for keeping us organized, on time, entertained. Thank you so much, Rod, for all that you do. And thank you to Open Text once again for their generous support. A big thank you to Blue Elephant, our event producers, Dare, Maurice, Sam, and their team, and Jen Blake for all your hard work organizing this event. I will tell you, for the remaining time, we have about 20 or 30 minutes or so. The books will be sold on the side there. Take Tap and Square. Mike and Tom would be happy to sign the books for you as well. And when you get a chance, learn more about the foundation from our website, rcffoundation.ca, our social feeds, of course, and wish you a good day, and thanks for being here. Thank you.